It's such a pleasure, you guys, for me to have Mr. Albert Woodfox with me, someone who is an activist, someone who has always stood up to the system, and somebody who has been a voice for men, and particularly Black men, after he came into consciousness, after reading certain books and getting into the Black Panther Party. This man has went from being a 1 in 4 person who could have been a victim to the system to now being somebody speaking truth and light to power. I saw so much emotion in that video when you were freed, Mr. Woodfox, and the fact that someone even mentioned it, you're still doing this work, I would think you would want to be so far away from this, and yet and still you're showing up to the Solitary Confinement Coalition meetings in person and being very active. And so please, Mr. Woodfox, can you share with me a little bit about your experience in dealing with solitary confinement?
As history is already recorded, myself and Harmon Wallace were placed in solitary confinement in April 1972 as a result of a correctional officer being found stabbed to death in one of the living units, Pine 1. Because of our political activities and organizing in the system in Angola, we automatically became suspect. I was actually the first prisoner that they locked up in the dungeon for investigation of the death of Mr. Miller, Officer Brent Miller. And eventually Harmon was picked up. And the strange thing about that investigation at the time is that no white inmates were being investigated. They were being questioned, but they were not being accused or investigated for the actual murder itself. And I was placed in a dungeon, as I described, a jail within a jail or a dungeon. The dungeon is a punishment unit. It's like when you violate prison rules or you're under investigation, they put you in there. And the restriction is even more than that of solitary confinement. You're not allowed any personal items, change your underwear and anything like that. You're only given a jumpsuit maybe once a month, once a week rather. And you're in the cell. The dungeon has evolved over the decades from, at one time you used to get 2 slices of bread 3 times a day. And because of, time and protests and court rulings on cruel and unusual punishment, eventually they went to 1 meal every 3 days. And until now, you get like the regular meals. You get 3 meals a day now in the dungeon. At least that was my experience, when I left prison. It didn't surprise me because of the way I've been treated, for the last almost 50 years. But, you have to remember, solitary confinement in Angola, and I would imagine other prisons, it's not filled with prisoners that come from another place. They come from prison population that you lived in. So there were a lot of sexual predators who were put in solitary. As a matter of fact, the prison system, the prison administration used to put guys who were known as troublemakers on the tiers that we lived on. Tiers. Harmon and I had been organized under the principles of the Black Panther Party. Each one teach one. Unity, there's strength in unity. Consciousness, raising awareness of what you consider to be immoral or undignified treatment of human beings. And so, we, not on the tier I was on, because we had, a collective meeting in which we laid down principles that we would govern ourselves by. And so sexual predators, knew right from the beginning, when they put them on a tier that it wasn't going to be tolerated. That if they tried to intimidate or rape somebody on a tier, they would be dealt with. You don't want to talk about the violent aspect of prison, but you have very limited ways in which you, especially when you're in solitary confinement and you're in a cell by yourself 23 hours a day. So any action you take has to be a collective action, a collective thing. And so
Mm,
we would always start out with ostracizing that person, you know, not talking to them, not supporting them, not, you know, giving them any the benefits of any of the programs that we had established, you know, and then usually they would, you know, we used to try and check out, but, you know, they would leave the tip and
mm,
sometimes required acts of violence, you know, because in spite of the warnings, they would still, you know, try to practice, you know, sexual predatory practices. And, you know, so it was that kind of situation
mhm,
in dealing with it in population, you know, before being, you know, locked in solitary for investigation. We used to go down, it's called Fresh Fish Day. It was every Thursday when prisoners come from uh, orientation for usually a month. And in the prison population, they had been assigned to living quarters and jobs and stuff, usually in the field, you know. And so a lot of these kids, you know, who's fresh fish at the term used, guys who first time you can see it in their eyes, the mannerisms and stuff. As someone who's been through this already, you know, who's been there, maybe this may be their second, third, fourth time in coming into the prison system. And so, you know, we would go to these guys and we would talk with them and ask them, you know, and try to provide them with information they normally wouldn't have. What to do, what not to do, the traps that's used to by sexual predators, and the last result, make ourselves available if they need physical help. You know, somebody was thing. You know, as a matter of fact, one of the sad parts of my life is that a brother who had joined our prison chapter, his name is Urban Bro, and his name was Life. He actually, after the Brent Miller investigation and all people being locked up and transferred, he still, in spite of Harmon and I uh, telling members, you know, that we had to suspend everything until, you know, the sanity return as we know it to the prison. But Life, being the type of dedicated brother he was, you know, he tried to protect a young kid, and he wound up being killed for being stabbed to death. So he had no support, and you know, prior to us going being locked up and stuff, you know, when it was necessary to confront somebody, it was always two or three of us. And so, you know, he tried to protect his kid by himself. And he two brothers who were sexual predators stabbed him to death.
First of all, thank you for sharing. Like, I know how my work in dealing with people who have dealt with trauma and unpacking that sometimes can be, it can bring you back to that moment. So I just want to honor this space and time and honor him, and just hold a little space for him, just to say thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a good way for me to go into my next question: is how did it affect your mental health, and what are you doing right now to heal?
Solitary confinement serves no penological purpose. Its main purpose is to break the human spirit, to destroy individual's sense of self-worth, and to place you in a situation where uh, the culture of solitary confinement is to make you feel isolated and separated from everyone else, you know. And it reduces, it was one of the most despicable things, but guys in solitary actually were reduced to fighting by throwing human waste, their own human waste on one another, you know. So our responsibility, Robert Herman and I, we tried to counteract that by uh, first organizing a tier along the principles of the Black Panther Party and having what we call awareness of political classes and talking about these kind of things and trying to raise people's level of consciousness and to give them a sense of self-worth that you are better than this, that you deserve to be treated. So, instead of, preying on one another, why don't we use that same energy, that same strength, and fight against the real enemy, the oppressors, which was prison security and the administration, and the individual, institutional, and systemic application of racism that was very, very prevalent in Angola. Still is, but at that time, as I say, we live in an age now where racism has put on a suit and a tie, and in my opinion, it occupying even the White House now. So, but at that time, it was brutal in your face. There was no coded words like they are now, or the word nigger was, used prevalently, and, the treatment between the different Angola was segregated at the time. And what most people don't realize, and we come to understand, is that Angola is a system, a form of slave plantation, and it's controlled by certain families. Now, these families go back all the way to chattel slavery. So their attitudes and stuff about particularly Black people is passed along. The techniques and methods that they feel a way to control and destroy the spirit of African American prisoners is passed along. It's like a lot of other things passed along in families around the dinner tables or in the living room or day-to-day activities. So that's a big problem. And so they had almost like this godlike power. They answered to no one at that time in the 70s. And Angola, had been designated as the bloodiest prison in America, so almost every day, someone or somewhere in Angola, someone will either kill or bludgeon or either by security or by prison violence, And so we felt as though the best way to combat this was to try to raise the level of consciousness of the men, first by the examples, the way we conducted ourselves, and then by using whatever values and morals and principles that we had learned and apply that to the way we lived on a daily basis. I mean, one of the programs was one of the biggest problems is that prisoners in particularly, in Angola, don't have a source of income. Most of the guys' families just can't, they're so poor, they barely making it, so they can't afford to send money or stuff like that there. So in order for these guys, the prison does not, the money and whatever that was supposed to be designated toward providing prisoners with things, they never saw. So therefore, the instinct to survive is the strongest in humanity. So they became victimizers. You either was a victimizer or you was a victim. And so this contributes greatly, just like in society, economic contributes greatly to, probably 95% of the crimes in this country. People, everyone, I truly believe that every human being would like to survive in a normal, honorable way. But, if you can't, the old saying is, if I can't do it the right way, then I'm going to do it whatever way I can. And this kind of like leads to violence, leads to crime or what we designate as crime. And now with the mass incarceration prison industrial complex, prisoners now no longer represent punishment for violating the laws of society. Now they have become an economic entity. They represent dollars and cents for these private corporations. And business is good when these organizations are trading on Wall Street. One organization, I think, I know they changed their name, but it used to be Wackenhut. And the last I report, they was trading something on Wall Street, something like $60-something a share. So that tells you right there. And Wackenhut builds private prisons around. They went from building private prisons in the United States to now they build them around the world. So let's say they only have 75% of prisoners, they will still have to pay that agreed upon price with the state. So and then you got all the other entities like the phone companies, like and some prisons it's like $8 a minute to talk to your loved one who can't afford to come visit, can't afford to send money, and stuff like that. There, so you know the dangers of a mass incarceration of the prison industrial complex now is that so many people are benefiting from this. And what a lot of people not interested in Robert Don talk about is that now these major corporations are signing contracts with prisons, DOC, Department of Corrections, to produce their products on slave wages, you know. So now you have a direct challenge to the working class people in this country who, the moms and dads and grandparents and uncles and aunts who try to take care of their family. So if you got a worker who may getting, let's say, just a minimum wage, which is $7.50, I think, and a prisoner may get 20 cents, 15 cents, a dime. If you work in the field, you get 2 cents an hour. So you have slave labor now challenging working class people, and sooner or later, a very large percentage of the products produced worldwide will be done by slave labor from prisoners in America and around the world. There's this one guy, I can't think of his name. At one time, if you had mental problems, the solution was to lock them up, put them in solitary confinement. It was like a warehouse people who had mental problems. And they had this drug they used to use. It's called prolixin. And it virtually turned anyone who takes it into like we used to use the term a zombie, a walking zombie. Everything, your motor system, your mental capacity, everything is like almost slows to a crawl. And most guys, when they take this medication, and it was mandatory, I've seen them force guys to take it. Actually, guys that wouldn't take it or was trying to get off of it, they would actually, call them, put them on call out, medical call out, and they were supposed to be going to see the psychiatrist or social worker or whatever, and they would overpower them physically and force this drug down their throat. And so my personal experience, we had a security officer, black guy, he was a grandfather in a grandfather age. He would let me actually, you're not supposed to have two people in the hall at the same time. But he would actually let me out when this guy time, and I would actually have to go in his cell and help him and take him to the shower and get in the shower with him and wash him and stuff, because and clean his cell and stuff like that, mop his cell and stuff. Now he wasn't supposed to do this, but this was a part of his humanity. Like I say, there was a time, especially when I saw security people as the enemy, and I remember reading a piece by Mr. Nelson Mandela, and he talked about how he was able to stay in touch with and run the ANC during apartheid in South Africa. And he virtually, not verbatim, but what he was saying is, don't prejudge these people, let their actions determine how you relate to them and eventually how you may feel about them. But there was a time when, there was actually nothing they could do, to bring out the humanity in me. They were automatically the enemy because they were the primary source, not individually, but as a group of all my pain and sufferings.
Wow.
And so after, I've always said in my speeches that there are times in life when I believe that an individual or an event can raise your level of consciousness, make you aware that what has been acceptable is no longer acceptable. And so after reading that, I began to judge security men based upon, uh, you know, their treatment of me as an individual and prisoners as a whole. And I think that recognizing that humanity in this we used to call we usually refer to them as Sarge, and at some point it may get to the thing where you learn their name and stuff, and you're on a first name basis, But this Sarge, he took it upon himself, to not. Most of the sergeant would come on and like, clean that cell up, it's stinking and stuff, and knowing all along that, this guy was virtually paralyzed by this drug he was being forced to take. But this sergeant, his humanity, you know, through a conversation with him one day when I was in the hall, he was like, man, can y'all do anything, man? That cell stink. I'm saying, well, if you let us out, let me out. When you let him out, I will clean the cell, and help him shower, And he said, well, let me think about it. And he's like, my job is on the line, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, I give you my word. My only purpose is to help this man, So you know who I am, you know my reputation. And so one day he opened my door and I looked out in the hall, and he made motion to come down. So I went up to the front of the chair, and he said, look, I'm going to let her, I almost called his name. I think it was Larry or something, Let him out and, I'm going to put some a mop and stuff on the chair and, go back in your cell and then, you can, I'm like, good. So that's what he did, he let him out and me and him, so I'm like, Larry, you okay? And he's like, oh yeah, blah, blah. I'm like, come on, we're going to take a shower, And I would take him to the shower, and we would both get in the shower and I would wash him down and everything, dry him off and, give him a jumpsuit. And then I would go in the cell and sweep it out, mop the floor and stuff like that. So that was my personal, contact with someone who was mentally, and, but there were so many other guys that came through that wasn't taking prolixin. But they would express their mental breakdown in other ways. Like some guy would talk to themselves or they would talk out loud. Or some guys, they call it beat the box, they would beat on their bed a rhythm and just sing at the top of their voice. Illness, it manifests itself in so many ways, so many different ways. And you get to the point where you don't become immune to it, but you recognize it, and that me, I guess it's an individual thing. And that to me gave me the opportunity to analyze the conduct of some of these guys and in turn talk to the other guys, because a lot of times a guy be mentally ill on a chair and he become such a major distraction that someone will attack them, And the things you never talk about a lot in solitary is a very violent environment, and the security people knew this and they made things available where guys could use to hurt themselves, like they used to sell lighter fluid in the canteen, and guys had been burnt seriously, hot water, guys would make spears and catch guys where they're sleeping and reach in the bar to stab them. So having to combat all of that, showing guys that you can resolve issues uh, without being violent, without hurting one another and stuff. That, and we were very successful. With the tears, Robert and I, Hillary King, we were fortunate enough where we lived on a tier for a very long time. And so Harmon was on another tier because the state of Louisiana, through the court system, had obtained an order that we would never be allowed to live on the same area. We couldn't even see our attorneys at the same time until the attorneys that we eventually got uh, went to the court and got a court order that we could meet with them together. And but that was decades. It went like that, and we virtually fought most of our cases on our own. We taught ourselves the law over a period of time, and we understood how the court system worked and how to read and interpret opinions issued by the court. And, it was a difficult process, but we knew that up to that point, most of our resistance were physical. Hunger strikes, which is very painful to the individual, and really in solitary confinement, that's the only effective form of protest. If you're going to act as a whole tier, and so I think that helped me and Robert and Harmon to survive so long in South. Robert 29 years, Harmon 41, and me 44, 10. Because we use the term, because we were looked to as leaders, it required us to accumulate knowledge, to read a lot and stuff, so that we could teach other men, we could lead other men, and I think that helped me and Robert and Harmon tremendously, because we didn't just survive solitary, we prospered as human beings. We developed the highest standard of moral principles and values, code of conduct. And we had, these principles and values stuff applied for everyone, whether it was another prisoner or security or administration. We ensure security a certain respect and then turn around and disrespect a prisoner. We respected everyone the same way, and our resolution to problems and stuff was always, the same. And so I think that if there was something different as to why we survived, and is that we prospered. And I wrote about it in my book, and I talked about it and still talk about it. Our cells were meant to be death chambers. That was the intent when they locked us in solitary confinement because of the Brent Miller murder. In spite of overwhelming evidence to show that we had absolutely nothing to do with this officer's death, we had to challenge the power structure of Angola. We dared to challenge the conduct of security people and the corruption of administrations. We became, like I said, I was the very first one, and they denied it. But the very first day, I was marched before the entire prison population on the gun from it's called a clothing room, where they was conducting investigations, to the dungeon in front of, and in prison, when you were doing what we were doing, you're not loved by everyone. You develop enemies, because you interfere, especially the sex slave squads that we invented to try to help these kids from not being raped and stuff. We made a lot of enemies, the voice of my mom, the voice of the street was louder than my mom's, and she lost the battle. And the voice of the Black Panther Party was louder than the voice of the street. And therefore began the first step in the journey I'm still on now. Motherhood is probably the most beautiful and wonderful thing that a woman can provide to humanity. It, it is taxing on the body, but it has been my experience, what it does for uplifting the spirit and a sense of self-worth and the promise of hope and the future, is childbirth. This should be a time, wonderful attitude and conduct of a woman. Uh, the physical demands of childbirth is in itself enough. You add to that by placing a pregnant woman in a solitary cell for 23 hours a day with all the pressures that's involved. And that's cruel and unusual by any standards. Uh, my motivation is my love for humanity. In my self-education and in my level, being raised in my level of education, I began to understand first that I was not who the country had taught me that I was, and that I had value. And somewhere along the line, not consciously, but I developed this unbelievable love and passion for humanity. I learned from reading, Nelson Mandela that if a cause is noble, you can carry the weight of the world. This man carried the weight of a whole nation, of a whole world on his shoulder, and he didn't break. You know, and that's the way eventually felt that what I was doing was a noble cause. Certain things are guaranteed. The right to a fruitful life, food, shelter, medical care, education. These, I think, any civilized society should guarantee us. Happiness is an abstract philosophy. That's up to us. That's something we have control on. But how the being in solitary affected me, uh, I still suffer from claustrophobia. Not as often as I used to when I was in prison. And I have far more than a 9 by 10 cell in space wide. So I can, my solution was always pacing, and there are times now when I wake up and for a brief moment, I'm not aware of where I'm at, and it's very confusing and, but I say moments. Actually, I have no exact time and how long but there are times when I wake up in the night or in the morning and for a moment there, I'm like confused as to where I'm at. So that's my personal effect of solitary. And the one thing I learned since I've been out is that claustrophobia attacks can occur even when you're in a room full of people. It don't have to be by yourself. And it's a horrible, horrible feeling. No one should be put in a position where this is a side effect or the results of a certain type of treatment. And first of all, we have to, I think, remember that these are human beings we're talking about. These are men, women, and in some cases, children. These are not people who come up from another planet. And the sad thing about America is that every time we are faced with a crisis, we fail. We fail as a society. And that's, to me, there's no perfect economic system, but there are economic systems that I think can need to change their priorities, in which humanity must be the first objective, and wealth not comes later. But at the same time, Harmon is a constant reminder of what loyalty and dedication is.
Yes.
He gave his life.
Yeah.
And my personal opinion is that the state was successful in killing Harmon.
Wow.
That's my personal view. And as I said, you know, he was an extraordinary human being uh, to the very end, you know. And so he's always with me. He's always motivating me, you know. And you know, if you read my book, or if you do, there was a poem in there called Echoes. It is a tribute to my mom and women as a whole, you know. And you know, I often, you know, read that poem, you know, in moments of distress, you know, and I do have times when some difficult analysis and decisions I feel I have to make. And, you know, like that poem say, my mom, I still hear my mom's voice in my heart and soul. I still uh, heed her advice, you know, as simple as she was uneducated, but she was the smartest, wisest, you know, woman that I had ever known, you know. And I was so happy that uh, before she passed away, I was able to sit down with her and tell her how much I loved her and apologize to her for all the pain I had caused, and to let her know that among heroes, she will always be my first hero.